because I won't get lost, so yes, I figured you would put a bunch up. I mean, my list. Yes, I know. guests like to have Doku San tonight? Thank you. When I tap you, it'll be your turn.
Kata on opening the sutra. The Dharma incomparably profound and infinitely subtle is rarely encountered even in millions of ages. Now we see it, hear it, receive and maintain it. May we completely realize the Tathagata's true meaning.
So good evening, everyone. Can you hear me okay? We have got a cozy little group tonight. Thank you for coming out in the cold. So as many of you know, we finished up Ango on Sunday. Ango is our intensive practice period, which we do in fall and spring. And the theme of our Ango was Lotus in the Fire, how do we practice in a burning world? So Ango is over, but the burning world is not, right? We practice endlessly. So I kind of wanted to pull that thread of, in the broad scope of Buddhist teachings, there are some very specific technologies for actually being able to practice in the midst of samsara, in the midst of this suffering world. And I want to touch on one of them tonight. I want to talk about the four immeasurables, which we recite in the daily liturgy, right, every day under generating love and compassion. May all beings of happiness, which is loving kindness, metta. May all beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering, which is compassion, karuna. May all beings have the joy that has never known suffering, sympathetic joy, or mudita. And may all beings be free from clinging and hatred, equanimity, upekkha. And these teachings go deep and broad in the Buddhist world, and right back into the Theravada tradition, into the original Buddhism of the Buddha. He actually taught on these in the Sutra of the Threefold Knowledges, the Tevijja Sutra. So he introduced these four immeasurables in Pali, the language of that day, the Brahmaviharas. And he said that if we want to be liberated, we must cultivate these four unbounded qualities. So that's quite an instruction, right? If you want to be enlightened, you must cultivate these boundless qualities. And he says to do so, of course, we must do it in the within the threefold teachings of Buddhism: morality, or sila, samadhi, or concentration, and prajna, or wisdom. So it all, of course, is interconnected. You might have heard that before. It all works together, right? And then if we look at the Mahayana, all of these threads are pulled through. The teachers are currently teaching the Lamrim, the stages on the path to enlightenment, which is like a compendium of Buddhist teachings. They're currently teaching on Tsongkhapa, his Lamrim, and the four immeasurables there come under the great scope. And in the great scope, we are generating the mind of bodhicitta, the Bodhi mind, which is the aspiration for the awakening of ourselves and of all beings. I believe next year they're going to be teaching the Tsongkhapa presentation of the Lamrim, liberation in the palm of your hand, And he presents them as actually preliminary practices, where he talks about positioning body and mind. So we're all kind of familiar with positioning body. We just have beginning instruction. We talked a lot about positioning body, right? Our meditation practice, the way we move through the zendo, the way we bow, all of these, positioning body, none of these forms are random. But how do we position mind? Well, we do this all the time also here at the temple. Anytime we do an activity here, we come into presence, we relax the mind, we set intention. Setting intention is this aspiration, and we always in that intention include for the sake of all beings without exception, for their enlightenment, for all of our enlightenment. So we actually position the mind all the time. This is the raising of Bodhi mind. So we're sowing the seeds of well-being in ourselves and in others constantly. And how do we do this? How does this practice of the four immeasurables speak to this? Well, in Buddhism, as Doan Roshi always tells us, there are the two central paths. There's wisdom and there's compassion. Of course, they're not separate, right? But the four immeasurables speak to both paths because we're actually learning how to expand our experience, how to actually expand our heart-mind Shin. And if you look at the names given to the four immeasurables, you'll realize how important they are. They're called the four great catalysts for awakening, which is quite a claim, right? They're called the immeasurables, or limitless ones, because they represent love and goodwill towards all beings without exception, without limit, endless, boundless. They're called the Brahmaviharas, or the divine abodes, because these are the mental states in which the enlightened beings reside. This is their baseline. And they're also referred to as cultivating the virtues of the heart that help us cultivate positive behaviors and reduce negative behaviors. So boundless and immeasurable, and also extremely practical. They're actually showing up in our lives. So in this particular practice, how do we position mind? This is such a pragmatic and practical practice. We always start where we're at. We don't start with some vague idea of expanding the heart to everyone. We start with where we're actually at. So we might start with love, maybe our love of music, our love of art, our love of poetry, of gardening, where you actually feel that quality in your heart, really feel it, honestly feel it. And then we might work with our empathy for a child or for a beloved pet, something that without effort we actually can feel compassion towards. Then with joy, joy of just hearing good news. So like our local track team has won again. And you kind of feel that unbounded joy with everyone, right? It's just naturally there. It's part of the human condition. And then equanimity, when you're at ease in the company of good friends, it's easy to feel this. So we touch on it where we actually are, where we genuinely are. This is an authentic practice. Even though it is a practice and it is hard work, we're actually working with the capacity we really do have. And the difficult part of this practice is in cultivating the immeasurables, you actually have to intimately encounter the barriers to these qualities, the barriers to love. You can't bypass that. You know, as Jung said, the only way around is through, and that's really true here. So the Buddha talked about the far enemies of these qualities, which are pretty gross and obvious, like the far enemy of love is hatred. That's pretty easy to understand. But then he also talked about the near enemies of these qualities, which can be very subtle. The near enemy of love, for instance, is attachment. And attachment can sometimes look like love. It can even in the heart feel like love. So we're getting down in a very granular way into what we're actually feeling and to where we're actually encountering barriers. So we'll probably just have time to look at loving kindness tonight, but really the process you go through with loving kindness is exactly what you do with all four of these qualities. So loving kindness, may all beings have happiness. Love is the wish for all beings and ourselves to be happy. We're all here because we want to be happy, right, basically. And that is basically Buddha nature trying to express itself. Because what is real happiness? It's being in alignment with who we really are. It's that opening of the heart. It's relaxing into our true nature, that feeling of coming home to ourselves. And of course the Buddha pointed out that this wish for our own happiness is not separate from the wish for the happiness of all beings. He said, whoever loves themselves will never harm another. Because the more you practice and you dig into these, the more you realize how profoundly you hurt yourself when you hate or when you mistreat other people. It just, you realize the damage you're actually doing to yourself. So the practice we do around loving kindness is called metta practice. Many of you might be familiar with it. It's a pretty broad practice in the West, presented in various forms. I'm going to give you the Buddhist version of it, which goes pretty deep. And first, what you do first is, as I said, you encounter the tenderness you already have, right? In Buddhist cultures, traditionally, you start with yourself. And as Joan Roshi said at one of the Lamrim teachings, where they taught on the immeasurables, I think in the September class, and she said, you start with yourself because you have to know what your own suffering is. You have to know how this works in your heart. But the problem for some of us is in the West, this self-hatred, this self-criticism, this self-judgment. So a lot of Western teachers will actually start with a being that we love unconditionally. And basically what we're going to do is touch into the feeling of love we already have, and we're going to expand it outwards, way outwards. So we start with ourselves, or we start with a being that we love unconditionally. There's a story that when Sharon Salzberg was speaking with the Dalai Lama, I think at a conference or a workshop, and she was trying to explain this self-hatred that we have in the West. He could not understand what she was talking about because there is no such concept in the Tibetan language. So we had this long consult with his interpreter, and finally he turned to her and he said, but do people in the West want to be happy? And of course we want to be happy, right? Even in the midst of this self-criticism, deep in our heart, we know our birthright is this happiness. This longing is always there, and it's authentic and it's true. No matter how much we beat ourselves up, it's there. So in the metta meditation, we start with ourselves, or with a being that we love unconditionally. So it's a very genuine feeling, a very genuine, open heart. And then we move outward to people we feel neutral about, like people we don't really know. We see them in the line at the coffee shop, we see them on the bus. The relationship isn't charged, it's pretty neutral. So it's kind of easy to move out to wishing happiness for these neutral people. And then we kind of move over to people who are difficult. People we might find mildly irritating, like whose company we wouldn't seek out, but again, not too charged. But we're definitely encountering some barriers now. I don't feel it naturally in my heart, that love for those people. And then as we get proficient in the practice, we move out to enemies, people who have actually caused us pain. And now we're getting into really encountering those barriers. And then eventually, as we practice, we actually expand outward in the 10 directions, outward beyond space and time. And what we're doing is we're expanding the heart out through this very gradual, pragmatic practice where we habituate to this expansion of love. So we actually train in love in all kinds of relationships. Relationships that are freely flowing and relationships where we're blocked. And it's a critical part of the practice that you have to encounter those blockages. So it's not an easy practice. It's something you have to practice consistently and really have intention around. So how do we work with the barriers? Well, in Buddhism, sometimes you hear talk of the proximate cause. So like the proximate cause of love is lovableness. There's a reason 2-year-old children are cute and lovable because, survival of the species, right? It's a lot easier to engage a cute 2-year-old. And that's basically how we work. We actually seek the lovableness of the people around us. And once you start looking at that, you kind of see it everywhere. It's like when you buy a black car, suddenly you see black cars everywhere. So when you start looking for the lovableness of this person, to have that in your consciousness, you're more likely to actually find it. There's that in Matthew's Gospel, where your treasure is, there will your heart also be. So it's that feeling of opening up to actually seeing this and encountering it. And usually you have to be proficient in this practice to love the unlovable person, right? This is not a quick fix, and it's not a direct path. It's a lot of working with your heart-mind over and over and over again. And it's endless. This practice is endless. So basically we need the paramita, the virtue of patience, the great paramita of patience, because we have to turn towards these feelings that we would rather not encounter. Right? We actually have to be with them, encounter them deeply, and honestly notice what is really happening. And there's a great dignity in being able to bear what you're able to bear. Right? There's actually dignity in expanding outwards into finding this love in people that we wouldn't naturally find it in. And the point is we're doing this as an intentional practice. We're actually putting our heart into this. It's not just where I naturally feel love towards this person, we're actually cultivating love. And of course, you don't have to do it all at once. It's not an affirmational practice, where you're kind of covering over what I really feel. It's an aspirational practice, just like the Bodhisattva vow to bring all beings to awakening is aspirational. Pema Chodron talks about the Bodhisattva. On some days, like you throw open the door of your house and you're out there in the world and you're encountering all the pain and suffering and you're on it. And other days you can barely open the door, just look out the door and bless you all, and now I just got to go back and sit on the sofa. And that's fine. It's fine. You are honestly encountering where you really are, and you're treating yourself with that loving kindness that you wish for all beings. So the barriers, as the Buddha said, we have far enemies and near enemies to loving kindness. The opposite is the far enemy, which is hatred. That's pretty obvious, right? The near enemy is attachment, and that can really present as love. And by necessity, almost all human love has an element of attachment in it. It's just, just look at evolution and how this happened. But it's when we tip over more into attachment than in love that we run into difficulties. It's when I want someone else to be happy because it makes me comfortable, because it makes me feel good. When it's basically egocentric, we know it's attachment. And of course, the trouble with attachment is it's very shaky. That can change on a dime. We all know people who've been in relationships where, oh, I can't live without my soulmate. This is the one. And within a reasonably short time, I hate that person. I never want to see them again, because it's actually based on attachment. I was just reading an article on the San Francisco Zen Center and the trouble they went through in the mid-'80s, where their abbot was asked to resign because of sexual misconduct. And the author of that article said, students who were like almost devotional towards that teacher, had great reverence for that teacher, were actually the ones who turned on that teacher and couldn't even see his human failings as human. They just completely rejected him because really their relationship was based on attachment. And of course our relationship with our teachers is dharmic. It's based on equanimity. And this is what we're really doing with the immeasurables, is we are equalizing all beings. The remedy for attachment is equanimity. So in metta, we teach just as the sun shines without discrimination on every surface. This is what we do with love. We love all beings without limit and without discrimination. And we actually have to work on that. We actually have to have the intention to do that. Compassion, just briefly, compassion is a lot more challenging because you're actually encountering the pain of others and your own pain, and you're facing it head on. It involves, I think Pema Chodron said, learning to go to the places that scare you, the places you actually don't want to go to. And the trick is to stay with that emotional distress, and rather than have it harden you and tighten you, to allow it to soften you. And that takes a lot of practice to do that. But the practice of compassion in the Four Immeasurable actually walks you through that in a very authentic, tangible way. It's not an intellectual exercise. You actually do this meditation and encounter all of these barriers. And we're drawing from the wholeness of our experience. We're not repressing anything. Particularly with compassion, we're working with our heart, with our hurt, and with our anger and with our rage. The whole human experience. And as Don Roshi said in that teaching, we work first with our own suffering, because if we don't understand and acknowledge our own darkness, how can we possibly do that with other people? This shared humanity, we actually have to encounter it in our bodies, in our hearts, in our minds. And it has to be completely intimate. The Dharma is not personal, but it's completely intimate. And with metta practice, compassion practice, you are certainly bringing that intimacy into your experience, and it takes a lot of effort and also a lot of relaxing around it. The far enemy of compassion, of course, is cruelty, actually taking pleasure in the suffering of others, which is on full display in our country right now. Right? And the more subtle near enemy is despair. How can I possibly hold all of this suffering? I need to protect myself. And then the remedy is sympathetic joy. So you see how all of these work with each other. Equanimity honestly underlies the whole thing. Rather than being a fourth practice, it's really what we're practicing with the other three. We're practicing equanimity, loving kindness, equanimity, compassion. How do I actually extend this to all beings without exception, without limit? How do I honestly encounter the barriers to love that I would really rather not encounter? How do I actually open my heart? So you can see why this is why these are the catalysts for awakening, because we're actually experiencing this in our body. We're actually going to the places we don't want to go to. And we're doing it in a very loving and a very open and self-compassionate way. So I could go through equanimity and joyful effort, but I have a poem, so you know, if in doubt, I'm always going to go for the poem. So and this poem is Kindness by Naomi Shihab Nye, and it really speaks to this equalization, to this common humanity, and to how painful it is to actually work with these barriers, but of how capable we all have the capacity to do this, to open our hearts. And she says, before you know what kindness really is, you must lose things. Feel the future dissolve in a moment, like salt in a weakened broth. What you held in your hand, what you counted and carefully saved, all this must go, so you know how desolate the landscape can be between the regions of kindness. How you ride and ride, thinking the bus will never stop. The passengers eating maize and chicken will stare out the window forever. Before you learn the tender gravity of kindness, you must travel where the Indian in a white poncho lies dead by the side of the road. You must see how this could be you. He too was someone who journeyed through the night with plans and the simple breath that kept him alive. Before you know kindness as the deepest thing inside, you must also know sorrow as the deepest thing. You must wake up with sorrow. You must speak to it till your voice catches the thread of all sorrows and you see the size of the cloth. Then it is only kindness that makes sense anymore. Only kindness that ties your shoes and sends you out into the day to gaze at bread. Only kindness that raises its head from the crowd of the world to say, it is I you have been looking for, and then goes with you everywhere, like a shadow or a friend. So let's dedicate the merit of this talk to all of those whose hearts are hardened, because all of these people have the capacity of the human heart to soften, to expand, to give love, and to receive love, and maybe song.
Beings are numberless. I vow to free them. Delusions are inexhaustible. I vow to end them. Dharma gates are boundless. I vow to enter them. The Buddha way is unsurpassable. I vow to embody it. Beings are numberless. I vow to free them. Delusions are inexhaustible. I vow to end them. Dharma gates are enter them. The Buddha way is unsurpassable. I vow to embody it. Beings are numberless. I vow to free them. Delusions are inexhaustible. I vow to end them. Dharma gates are boundless. I vow to enter